One of my favorite lines in all of Transformers has to be Studio Series. I have a soft spot for all of the Transformers movies, and that line is perfect for me. While it started as an only live-action project, it quickly grew into something far bigger than I ever expected it to. Now there's not only Studio Series, but Studio Series 86 and Studio Series Gamer Edition. I personally don't really like the Gamer Edition figures. I think they're a little bit too small, but Studio Series 86 is a completely different story. Sure, it's had its fair share of misses with Core Class Ratchet and Jazz, but I think we can all agree that in large part the Studio Series 86 crew is an absolutely stunning array of figures. It finally gave us things like a good set of Junkions, great Dinobots, and an amazing 86 cast. And of course, because Hasbro loves to do upgrades, there's an 86 Brawn and an 86 Bumblebee. Up first today is Brawn. This guy's painting and sculpting is absolutely stunning for a smaller deluxe. His stern, hard-ass expression is such a good look for this character. The light blue of his eyes and the silver of the face really just pop. Of course, I really love his iconic gray helmet. The chest, while being painted yellow, still looks amazing. It can kinda stick out sometimes, especially with some paint rub, but I still think they absolutely knocked the sculpt out of the park. As many of you who have seen my channel before, you may know I love vent detail on Transformers figures. I love how dark the green is on this guy. If it was a lighter green, I really don't think I would have liked it as much. And how could I not appreciate the silver forearms? With the risk of sounding a little bit odd, I really love his crotch sculpt. I don't know what it is, something about the angles on it just appeals to my eyes. While the rest of the legs are sculpted very nicely, they are pretty much just green. Except for the hint of silver on his caps. Something I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is the tire sticking out of the calves. It's just a neat little detail I love to see. Something I feel like I need to talk about with this figure is the heavy backpack. It gets in the way of his overall silhouette and leg articulation. Due to the backpack, they can only move that far backwards. Well, that far if you kinda kick it out more. There's just a big brick of kibble right below his hips, and it really bothers me. I mean, I guess it's kind of accurate, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Now for the big yellow bee himself. I absolutely adore how cartoon accurate this Bumblebee is. Sadly, I don't get the tube arms like I do on the Earthrise version, and the forearm cut is just a little bit too weird for me. I oddly adore these symbols on the backs of his hands. I really don't know why they appeal to me so much. Maybe it's just because it's a break in the smooth sculpt. That head sculpt is absolutely perfect for Bumblebee. Like Brawn, I really like the sky blue eyes, and the silver on his face accent them perfectly. But if you look very closely, there is a blemish under Bumblebee's chin and a black speck underneath his lip. Those kinda suck, but you really have to get up on the figure's face to see it. The only thing that's missing from this figure's head sculpt is a smile or at least a smirk. If you see my reviews again, you know that I love translucent windows a lot more than opaque ones. I'm not sure how translucent they are because they are pretty dark, but I still dig them anyway. Another thing I love is how clean the auto badge is. Again, I love Bumblebee's crotch sculpt. It has those little notches right here and the Y shape pointing up. Anyway, the legs are sculpted very nicely. They have a lot more panel lining detail and ridges than the arms do. And of course, he has big ol' feet. I get a sudden sense of deja vu when I say that. But instead of the Earthrise mold having long feet, this guy has tall feet. To be honest, I'm not really sure how much I like that. It doesn't make the articulation awkward, it just makes his overall appearance look a little off. But I digress, the detail on the feet is just as good. It's far more simplistic and angular. Honestly, that's why I like it a lot more than the Earthrise version. And he has nice little hits of silver for the headlights and gray for the bumper. Something that was and still is very much controversial about the Earthrise version is the removable backpack. The people who complained about that guy's parts forming really need to go touch grass and get laid. But also those people will be pleased to know that this is a fully transformable Bumblebee. The backpack does not untab or unpeg. Which, honestly, as much as I love the Earthrise version, I massively prefer. It makes him feel overall more tight and solid. Something about this figure I'm not the biggest fan of is the difference in yellows. And I'm not talking about on the chest. That's a painted yellow and that's a plastic yellow. I expect them to be different. No, I'm talking about the difference in plastic yellows. The forearms and the crotch are far more pale than the yellow of the rest of his body. I know I mentioned in my Tigatron review that different colored plastics have different tolerances, but this is egregious. That is incredibly easy to notice, both in person and on camera. But as silly as it sounds, that definitely doesn't ruin the figure for me. As for articulation, we'll talk about Brawn first. Out of the two we are talking about today, he is easily the most dynamic. Look at that elbow articulation. For a single hinge joint, that is downright perfection. The only things I really don't care for his articulation is how loose this arm is. And it's only when it's in this kind of position, it's not loose in any other position. That's just so weird to me. But even this mighty figure has a few flaws in articulation. No wrist swivel, and the head can't look up or down. No swivel at the wrist kind of makes sense because this hinge is a very weird hinge. And I suppose the head is fine too, because even if it was on a ball joint, it wouldn't be able to move because the helmet is shaped so roundly. This guy's Chonga tooth definitely helps with posing and balance. I can get him to balance on one foot, which is pretty rare for a Transformers figure. Even some of my favorite figures of all time can't balance on one foot without a fight. And of course, he comes with a blaster. It's a pretty basic sci-fi blaster, although I really do love these nubbins right here. And the arrow at the top of the barrel. I don't know if that's purposeful or not, but I still love it. Him with the blaster just absolutely enhances the dynamic feel of this figure. As for the B-Boy himself, he's basically the Earthrise mold, just more cartoon accurate. They packed everything they could into this B-Man. For such a small little dude, he is surprisingly acrobatic. And he has the two things I just complained about Brawn not having. Wrist swivels and ball joint at the head. As previously mentioned, the ankle pivot does look kind of awkward. If it was just closer down, maybe by the foot right here, it would be so much better. As is, it does kind of look out of place in my opinion. Outside of that incredibly small nitpick, this guy's articulation is smooth. Just like Brawn, when you put his blaster in his hand, he looks absolutely badass. Well, as badass as Bumblebee could look. I love that they went for the more classic Bumblebee blaster design. It's something I've wanted to see with a Bumblebee figure for a very long time. And Cyberverse Bumblebee doesn't count because it's not a G1 Bumblebee. You might have noticed this clip on the side of the gun. Well, that is for convenient weapon storage. What I love about this weapon storage is the backpack isn't egregious and it doesn't stick out of the sides. That is greatly appreciated. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about these guys in robot mode, so let's get into transformation. First, let's take a look at Brawn. I've always been a sucker for the off-road Transformers vehicles, and Brawn here is no exception. It is kind of plain to look at, and largely, in my opinion, that's due to the painted windows. Translucent windows, in my opinion, are the way to go unless they have to be made into a hinge. Here, when you think about it, they really didn't have to. It could have been separate translucent plastic pieces, like right here and right here. Okay, that's awful. That is just... I was saying egregious before, but that is egregious. I know it doesn't matter in robot mode, but it certainly matters in vehicle mode. If you're gonna paint the windows, paint them. If you're not, make them translucent plastic. I digress, I still love the paint apps like the painted wheels. Or the big red Autobot symbol, which is smack dab in the middle of his hood. And of course, you have his weapon storage. I really love the look of a turret on his vehicle mode. That just adds an extra pizzazz to it. As for Bumblebee's alt mode, I am such a sucker for this cute, chibi look to this vehicle mode. The more Penny Racer inspired vehicle mode here really pops. And I know I say this a lot, I even said it in my last review where I said it a lot. But this has to be one of my favorite alt modes in my whole collection. It's chunky, it's small, it's unique. What more could you want from a Bumblebee figure? I love the taillights. Usually on a yellow figure with painted red, it doesn't appeal to me, but here I think it looks fine. Plus you have pinned in wheels which make him spin very smoothly. The only thing I really don't like about this alt mode is the lack of his spare tire. It's something that I really liked on the Netflix version, but sadly didn't translate. I guess it could be for weapon storage or just to conceal the backpack more, but I really would have preferred it being here. There's realistic alt modes I like, there's animal alt modes I like, and there's nonsense I love. But this is something more special in my opinion. It's a stylization you don't regularly see in Transformers, and personally, I'm here for it. Give me more alt modes like this, please. That's pretty much all I have for alt modes, so let's get into my final thoughts. For my final thoughts, I think that these guys are perfect representations of what they're trying to be. G1 Brawn figures are incredibly hard to come by, and they're usually never this good. The last one I can see in recent memory is Titan's Return. This figure knocks that one out of the park. This guy's accessories, his articulation, his paint and sculpt, they all meld so well together, and if it weren't for a few issues, this guy would be absolutely top tier. As for Bumblebee, he is the Bumblebee we've been waiting for. He's small but not hindered. He has a good mix of smooth plastic and amazing detail. His accessory is awesome, the joints are nice and tight, and this is easily one of the best looking Bumblebees we've ever gotten. His alt mode alone is one of my favorite things in all of my collection. Seriously, this is just the Earthrise version, but better. But I will always stand by Earthrise Cliffjumper. This is my Cliffjumper, this is my Bumblebee, that's just how it's gonna be. Unless they actually make a Cliffjumper out of this guy. I'll probably get it. When are we gonna get an Outback and Goldbug? Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see more and you haven't already, subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!
The internet should never be used as a tool to bully others. So if you feel as though you're being bullied, log off, you little bitch!